Disembodied hands. Welcome, gamers, to Mini Paints. This is the first of hopefully a long secondary series to our battle reports, where I'm going to talk about miniature painting. I'm going to miniature paint for you. I'm going to show you techniques, just talk general strategies, and yeah, we'll have a good time together. So really, as an introduction to my painting style and just kind of what I do and how I do it, I'm going to talk about the original core set for Marvel Crisis Protocol. I'm going to show you kind of, I'll talk about my favorites in regard to like the paint job I put on them, and as far as like which ones are my favorite sculpts, because those are going to be different. Some of them I like the sculpts a lot, but I did maybe a lesser job than I would have liked. Some of them I did a really good job on, but I think the sculpts not so great. All right, so my least favorite child is this guy, and that actually has nothing to do with the sculpt at all. I actually think the sculpt is pretty good. Actually, it's really good. I think pretty much almost all the core set sculpts are really good. One thing I did on him, I converted him to have less of a 180-degree turn at the waist. So it's kind of a mild conversion, but you can see sort of from the top that he does not have that fully rotated look that a lot of them do. So, you know, made it a little more of a, just something a little unique to be mine. But you could see, I mean, this is probably like the fastest model of the core set I painted. Flesh tones are sort of, I guess, kind of like an Asian flesh tone, but not really particularly wonderful. Like, I think I did a wash and some highlights kind of thing. All the base color is basically just a dry brush, and then I went in and like hand rendered some like point highlights here and there. Did a little bit of like a non-metallic metal on the front here of his little punchy hands. Brass knuckles, punch knuckles, I don't know what you call that. A little bit there on the gun, that little blue spot. He's just an unremarkable piece. He's perfectly fine, but nothing exciting. So it's mostly my paint job, I think, that would put this guy dead last. This is another really good sculpt that I did a poor job on. I started applying a couple different techniques, and I tried to use some washes. I think it was a Vallejo wash, which are generally I don't regard very highly. And I just sort of lost a lot of the lining. I didn't want to just sit there with a brush and hand render it with like a thin paint. I was trying to like kind of shortcut it by like doing a wash and like maybe a reduction or something. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I effed it all up. I kind of went back and just did some like a regular wash and sort of a dry brush, and then picked up a little bit of point highlights here and there, you know, kind of like the crossbones technique. I'm happy with the colors. I like the bluish, turquoise-ish kind of Todd McFarlane style undersuit instead of the bright blue. But generally speaking, I'm just looking at him and I just don't see the rendering, and the lines are kind of not distinct, and you know, it's okay. It's a good like 1-footer model, 2-footer model, but you hold it up close and you go, ugh. Another thing I did too is I messed up. I lost some details when I was painting because I built up a couple layers screwing everything up, and I had actually painted this as like the red stops there, but that's not actually what the model has. Like the red should go to his forearm there. We'll call that a stylistic choice. There's Black Widow. Kind of similar techniques to Crossbones, nothing remarkable. All my metallics on my Marvel guys, I'm trying to push some of my techniques on these guys, trying to build up a little more light than I typically do non-metallic metals. So I did a non-metallic gold in, you know, like here and on her belt and stuff, and like her zipper, her pistol grip there. But this is a really quick model. I mean, it ultimately probably took me like 2 or 3 hours to just kind of render some of that out. I think I might have airbrushed in like the first layer of light on the black. Nothing too exciting, but you know, solid job for a solid little 2-pointer, but not my favorite miniature, and definitely not my favorite paint job. So there's Ock. I actually, Ock's probably my least favorite mini of the core set, like sculpt. I really wish he had been up on his arms. I think a lot of people convert it that way, but I wasn't going to put the time in for that. I actually think he's a little underrated in the game. Suffers from the same problems that some other models do, where they don't have an affiliation. That's why people don't play him. But he's actually a perfectly fine 3-pointer otherwise. So he's like base coats and I picked some bright colors, did base coats and washes, and just like a quick highlight. Probably the only interesting thing I would say about him is that I did after that, I painted all of this black, all the arms. Did the kind of, I don't want to call them Angel Heraldas because that's like a real insult to that dude. But my shitty job of pretending I'm Angel Heralda is where I built up the lights with an airbrush, went in and just hand rendered a little bit of highlighting. Quick job, but it actually kind of pops visually, and it looks metallic-esque. There's Red Skull. I think Red Skull's actually a pretty dope sculpt. He's very, statuesque, but that's fine. My paint job on him, most of the work was done with an airbrush on the coat. Same kind of blacks I used on the crossbones and the Widow. I kind of wish I'd actually done him more in like that German military greenish kind of color instead. I've seen that and it looks better than mine on other people's models. But probably the thing that's the most exciting about him is I really like the way I rendered the cube, like went in and just did the blend dark to light across the faces of the cube, and then went in and did like, the nice little edge highlights that make it all pop. Looks sort of kind of glass-like, almost like it's containing an energy. But if the cube didn't look that way, I think it would be overall pretty lackluster. Number 5, Captain America. So, as basically the middle child of my favorite models, I don't really know what to say about them. Pretty generic Captain America paint scheme. On some of my early core set models, I had built up a little too much primer, and these are one of the few downfalls of these models, which I think these models are extremely good. And that's not just me saying like nice things about MCP because I want them to give me free shit. The one thing I would say about these minis that's a downfall is that some of the detail is the lines and things can be pretty lightly cut. So like some of these lines here that define these like red and white areas in this lower part of his like lower back, these lines here, Spider-Man's lines, other spots, if you really yam on your primer a little too much, you can end up filling those, and you fill those up, and then when you go to paint, you really struggle. Especially, I found that if I built sort of dark to light with airbrush, I would lose those like really badly. So that's something I've addressed by putting thinner coats of primer on. I've gone to a different primer than I used to. But the early ones I had to hunt and peck a little bit to find some of those lines. Especially, I remember having to like find these almost by like putting a wash in them and be like, oh, there it is. So pretty happy with the reflective stuff on the shield. Definitely not the first guy to do that. There's plenty of painters out there who've done that better than me, but I'm trying to push my value shifts more, like the dark to light is pretty high there, so it looks metallic. But yeah, otherwise unremarkable, just a Captain America. So here's my Danvers. So my Danvers, I wouldn't even say this is technically a good paint job, really. The white is like contrast white, I think, over white primer, which I think this is the only contrast paint I've used on any of my MCP stuff. So the flesh tones and stuff are fine. I think our hair came out pretty nice. It's got real punchy. But what really I like about this is that I kind of have come up with these sort of, they're not alternate schemes because they're not in a comic book anywhere and they're not in a movie anywhere, but they're like feasible that they could be, like they're close enough to something where you look at that and go, oh yeah, I could, especially with the volume of comics that are out there, like, oh, Danvers probably wore an outfit just like this in some comic at some point. But yeah, so the scheme on her, just something I whipped up, probably the most complimented model in my collection. Like I hear more about like, oh, that Danvers scheme is awesome. But I think just the contrast of the white to the gold to the red is really striking. And she just has a really cool statuesque pose, and I think it's just kind of, she just pops off the table. As I started painting through the core set, my hipster mentality started to kick in and realized I needed to start doing some weird things, coming up with, real schemes that aren't real. This is my 8th favorite miniature. This Ultron I wanted to do an entire model in kind of like reflective, non-metallic metal, and that is a arduous process of rendering, no matter how much airbrush you use, and I've been kind of hunting that like Angel style. He is like my favorite painter probably, but I have to be realistic with like time and my own personal skill of rendering this stuff up. So this was kind of an experiment, and I think generally I'm pretty happy with where the light landed on him and the jumps in light, like where it builds from dark to light. So I did all that, airbrushed it, you know, started with a dark color, airbrushed in various layers, worked in some warm tones like this little, you can see some like bits of like that kind of orangey color here and there, and then some blues, as reflective sort of metal does. And, you know, I think I was like medium successful at that. I think it's pretty solid. And then I hit the end and I was like, well, I still want this guy to be like kind of different. So I decided on this like Miami Vice magenta glow instead of his usual red and orange-ish deal. And once I started it, at first I was like, this is probably a dumb idea and I'm gonna mess up a model I've been working on for too much time. But I really like it. I did all the OSL on that by hand actually, because some of these areas are pretty small. I got a little tight where I didn't want to use the airbrush on a model I'd spent all that time rendering. I just need to be a little more brave when it comes to that. It's okay to airbrush and screw something up and just fix it, you know. Gotta take risks. You know, he's kind of Vaporwave or Miami Vice or whatever. He's another model that people tell me that they like a lot just because he's a little bit different. But yeah, so he's definitely one of my favorites, and also one of my favorites on the table, and also a awesome sculpt, and also just enormous. Look at this dude. I mean, like if you've never, you know, if you happen to be watching my channel and you've never played MCP or seen an MCP Mini, you know, just as far as like a size comparison, I mean, that's like a Vallejo bottle, like that's a big miniature. And yeah, that's one of my favorite part of these models, is the size. I just think the Zemo sculpt is kind of just a classic, just an awesome pose, another statuesque pose, challenging. You know, I actually did what I usually don't do is I'll airbrush a couple easy to get to areas. Like airbrushing a sword's easy. You paint it black and then you like shoot a little gray in the direction where you want the light to hit, and you can like maybe you put a little masking tape over this to not get it or whatever, but it's not like you've got to mask half the model. But on this model, actually, I kind of finished up everything except for the sword and then these like greaves he's wearing. Shin guards, greaves? I think greaves is the right term. I'm not like a armor expert or anything. You can see the blend there. I'm really happy with that. That's probably like the closest to what I've been hunting for, that Angel style where it just has that nice like kind of glow. I managed to get the points of light to be within each other, and then I hit it with that like white light edge, and it just pops. So really happy with those. The sword I'm okay with. This light here should be here. That works a lot better, makes a lot more sense visually. The gold non-metallic metal is just rendered by hand, and you know, it came out pretty decent. Pretty happy with the leather and the various other bits. Yeah, I did kind of change his his purple I think is supposed to be all the way down to here, but I kind of liked it more as just like a neck, so I just kind of stopped and painted all this as like the undersuit or shirt or whatever. I love his jacket. I mean, he's just a badass. Like he's such a cool model. You know, and he's got those sweet little elbow pads. All right, so my favorite model from a painting perspective is this Iron Man. I think he was actually the second guy I did, and this is the one where I was like, I'm just gonna try a reflective, non-metallic-y looking thing, and I really just built up the red and I dug out the real pointy tiny brushes, which I don't generally do, and I think I did the airbrush to get the original light in, and then I went in by hand and rendered. But he's probably the closest thing to like an Infinity model in this game. He's got that segmented armor, usually really fun to paint because the recesses take a shade real nicely, and then you lay your highlight right next to that. You get that nice light next to dark value shift that makes the eye, you know, kind of go to it. I would say that he was one that I really struggled with the location of those thin lines because of how thinly sculpted it is. If I painted him again, I would give him like the lightest coat of like Tamiya superfine primer or airbrush primer or something like that, so I wouldn't lose those. But I'm really happy otherwise with him, and I like the light definitely has like a source on this guy, which is something I've been kind of hunting for. Object source lighting, did it all by hand, you know, here, I think that's it. Yeah, just those three spots, the eyes, the chest piece, and the repulsor hand. So that's my top 10 favorite Marvel Crisis Protocol core set children. You know, my bases, talking about bases real quick, they're just like a gray, a wash of like this stuff, Army Painter Soft Tone, diluted. A little dry brush of that gray over it. A little dry brush of a lighter gray. A little bit of hand edge highlighting on the edges. Glue in a couple of these tufts into the cracks of the sidewalk. And then the real thing is the matte varnish that ties it all together. Tufts tend to look kind of shiny and weird. And the matte varnish just really like makes them kind of have a nice little fade to them and makes them look like plants and not like carpet fiber. And thank you so much for watching another Mini Fights video. We really appreciate you enjoying our content. Please like and subscribe. Maybe throw a little beer money at our Patreon. Maybe we'll be able to buy some new camera equipment. Or beer. And we will see you in the next video. Thanks.